In the roll?
I'll call the roll.
All right, then Uso.
Okay, Peters,
Here.
Shetty, absent, Tupper,
Here.
Bueller, absent, Danforth,
Here.
Colleen.
Here.
Durin, absent. Thank you.
Quorum is established. Councilman Jones might be joining us later, we don't know. Chair will entertain a motion to approve today's agenda. Motion made by Councilman Peters. Good. Seconded by Councilman Danforth. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item A is a city council process and procedure discussion. City Attorney Carrico.
Oh, I thought it was last, I'm sorry.
I did too, that's why I was set up there.
You're first.
Yeah,
I got out of your way.
thank you, sir. All right.
City Manager Mack, is there a reason why we should change the order around? Did we
No.
want to, because if we wanted to change it around, we certainly could.
No, it really doesn't matter. I think internally we had talked about the flow but it's just fine.
Saying City Attorney Carrico just loves these meetings so much, she stays to the end every time.
I know.
Whereas perhaps City Engineer Peterson might want to leave. I don't know.
Really up to you.
Hello, council.
Ms. Carrico.
Okay. I did. Okay. So council, over the course of, I don't know, since the time that I've been here, which is a little over a year and a half, I've gotten various questions from the council, staff, different boards and committees, City Manager Mag, Public Works Director, just on different questions that come up with regard to how we do business and communicating and the policies and procedures. Obviously, we can't cover everything today. That would be a very long meeting and I would lose you after a good 20 minutes. So I thought I'd put together just some highlights that have come up just in the last couple months with regard to the different policies, procedures, statutes, but also to kind of go over the hierarchy, because a lot of times, and in all fairness, I am just as guilty. Someone will ask a question and we're like, well, the statute says this. And then somebody else will say, well, the Home Rule Charter says this. And then somebody will be like, well, then we have this governance policy or we have this guideline. And so in an effort to try and at least meld some of them together, I put together a little presentation. Now, this is, again, not all inclusive. It's kind of just to get the conversation going if there's maybe some areas that we need to deal with. And also, I see a couple more of these in our future, maybe not every work session, but occasionally I'll bring up something else just to kind of educate the council.
City Attorney Carrico, do
Yes.
you want questions asked of you as they come up in our heads, or do you want the presentation to go through?
As we go along.
Okay.
Okay. So first, one of the things that came up, because I'm just kind of jumping around and jumping ahead, was we have laws and we have policies. So I kind of laid out the difference between the two. So obviously the laws, we know, state statutes, right? You violate, you're trying to govern somebody's behavior. A policy is more internal and it can be external in the sense of just telling the community, this is how we are going to conduct business. This is how we're going to guide our decision making. However, which I think hopefully will be on the next slide. Somebody asked if policies were laws and to what extent they are enforceable. Now, in a private organization, more than likely, they are just guideposts. It's, someone could violate a policy and get written up, but they're not going to be, it's not like illegal, right? However, I noticed in our state statutes, the community does have the ability to refer any rule of conduct or course of policy that is in place for its citizens. So potentially, depending on what policies we have and what we're trying to do, someone could refer it and say, I disagree. If the city council created a policy of, this is what we deem most important for our community, because it does affect the community, technically the community could try and refer it to change that policy. So I just wanted to put that out there that our policies do have weight.
Carol,
Yes,
I think I know the answer to this.
okay.
Ordinances fall under the category of law.
So let's see, we have another slide. Here we go.
Uh,
Now, we have home rule charter, then your state statutes, your city ordinance, and then your policies. Now, if you notice, though, I have a star on the home rule charter. So there are certain things under state statute that you cannot amend with the home rule charter. What I would say as one of our examples is like our notice requirements to change a zoning ordinance. You know, we have to give 10 days notice, we have to have a public hearing. We can't change that with the home rule charter. But for all intents and purposes, how the city chooses to govern itself does supersede state statute and is in the South Dakota, yes, sir.
So a home rule charter cannot overgovern state statute, is really the easiest way to say
In
it.
most areas,
Okay,
the
so
state
there's
does
areas.
allow you to, though, in certain areas. Again, I didn't want to get into, that was a very good question. I'm just saying it would be a very long meeting if we went into those type of things. But I just wanted to point that out because people like to talk in the sense of absolutes. And I just want to make sure that we're all aware, there's always some gray area. And then policies at the bottom, again, this would be like the governance policies you all adopted, procurement policies that you guys have adopted, personnel policies. These are supposed to guide city government. And actually, let me back up the way. Okay, so we did that. We'll get to later in the slide. I know I'm jumping around a little bit. But one of the things about your policies that you need to remember is this is how you are telling the city manager to conduct herself and operations. And so when you are thinking of evaluations or something where you feel the city manager should be doing something different, you need to make sure that you're also reviewing your policies because these are the guideposts that you are giving her and any city manager.
Lisa, can I?
Yes.
Can I call you Lisa, by the way?
Yes, you may.
And I don't mean that disrespectfully, I just
No.
hear from you.
Yeah. We're in a work session, dude.
So policies and procedures, there's obviously those that are administrative in nature and in their use. Where does the council's authority lie? All policies up and down? Or is it just those above the line that's not administrative?
Well, I would
Does
say,
that make sense?
yep, and I would say for these purposes, oops, you are, the governance policies that you adopted are to govern yourselves and how you deal with staff and or issues and or economic development. The internal administrative policies, some of which you guys have approved, mostly because though you're trying to give the city manager authority to independently operate within the administration. And I guess the best example for that is procurement. So that every single contract doesn't have to come before you. So while yes, council needs to abide by these things, really you have adopted them to give power to the city manager to be able to do her job too. I mean, I guess, could you give me a different example? Personnel policies, obviously you guys aren't, you don't have to ask, right? Or I don't think you do. I guess I never really thought about it that much. What kind of policies are you thinking of? As an example.
I think. I know one that over time has been talked about, good, bad, or other.
Sure.
Is the policy of how, not the funding of, but how travel is accounted for. And again, not dollar wise typically, but how is the what is the travel policy? Now, that's administrative.
Right.
Or,
Yes, it is.
so although that could relate to us on the council side, but so that is a policy of what's the word I want to use probably, of determining how travel is accounted for both in planning and in costs while there, and in reporting thereafter, as far as what that travel brought. So we've had this discussion before where and I'll use just my experience as an example.
Sure.
I would plan my travel, we would budget for travel every year, whatever, and it would be just dollars, not a lot of detail. But I would budget for it in my budget, and I would plan it. I would justify what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, where I'm going, who's going, etc. I had explicit detail in regards to expenses, and then when I got done, I had to have a trip report. Okay, so that was our process, and that was in policy as to how we did that. So I know that's been talked about before, and I don't know, I have no idea what we have for this issue. I'm using that one as an example.
Sure.
So the question is, does the council have any input or any say in what that policy is, or because it's really administrative, is that outside the purview of the council?
The way that you guys have, or I should say the community has approved the home rule charter, I would say that no, you don't have the, you can say through the budget process, hey, we want to make sure that this money is being expended judiciously for travel. How the city manager decides to, as the personnel director, basically over HR of the city, she has the right to say, this is how I'm going to do it. Whether it's verbal, whether it's just having her department heads provide her with what she wants for information and then delegating to the department heads to then travel that down to their staff, because each department does operate differently. She, and this is the city manager, I keep saying she because it is a woman, so it could be she or he, but, the city manager's office, yes, would dictate how that would happen. The only thing you're doing is saying, if you had a concern, but you wouldn't be able to say, I think it should be submitted in triplicate and it should have a trip report. If they want to say, here's what write an email and say, here's what I did and this is how I did it and gave it to the city manager and that's okay with her, then that should be
So we
fine.
are drawing the line at administrative versus our
Yes.
conduct and manner of which we.
Yes,
Okay.
Yep.
We're just trying to be that.
yes.
My question is, to Mike's point.
Yep.
If we wanted to change that, could the council make policy regarding travel?
Not only on the city manager as her supervisor, I don't think that you could on staff.
Okay.
That's just my initial opinion. Yes.
And I think Amanda wants to say something.
And go ahead, city manager.
Well, I would just comment that, the governance policies that you've adopted some of them, we've talked about several others. Those are what put the parameters in place for any manager to operate within those bounds. So, for example, you could, when we have, if we have a financial policy that talks about travel budgets, it could be I don't even know what to, like an example to give, but the governance policies, one that was adopted, we talked about, ensuring that employees have evaluations and that when we're hiring people, we are ensuring that everybody has equal opportunity for professional development. And that's really how you would, in my opinion, ensure that the that the things you guys want are being carried out the way that you want them to. Someone asked me to create a form for my department heads to fill out, so I did, and they do now. We do have a travel policy. It's in the personnel manual. I've sent it out a couple different times. And so those things do exist. Perhaps more what you want is a reporting of, at the end of the year, how many of your employees had professional development opportunities and where did they go and what did they learn? Like those are great things to share to the collective. But Lisa can take that from there.
Some of the, city manager, Mac, some of that's covered in your bi-monthly or monthly,
The bi-weekly, yeah.
bi-weekly reports, yeah. I mean, so our officers to training in Denver, and this is what they went down to training for and blah, blah, blah. So some of that is covered under that, so. Or should I say, Chief Toomey, excuse me.
The subject came up about committees, partly because there's been different capital improvement projects, ordinance changes, things where at least it's been thrown out on occasion, should we form a committee? Should we have a committee of some kind and report back kind of issue? I've highlighted a couple things in here, and then there's some that, again, it would just been too lengthy. Oops. First of all, we have standing committees. Those are open-ended. They basically are ongoing. Off the top of my head, don't know that we actually have any. I guess the best one example could be not for council specifically, but for like school boards and things like that is when they're hiring people, they may have a hiring subcommittee that would vet the applications and then report back. We don't have any right now, as far as I know. And then ad hoc are established for a limited time to address one specific issue. So that's something to consider.
Okay, go back.
Yep.
I got a question, because this is the meat that we're.
Okay.
Because where we're going with this is where it come from was what my intentions were on the PM review, correct? That's where this is.
Yes and no, because you guys have also talked about it way back when we were talking about either Wells Fargo or the street facility. And I don't remember which council person, so I'm not going to pick on anyone. But basically it was, we used to have council on these design teams and, forming some sort of committee that would then come back to talk with council. So while yes, it's in part that, it was also, there've been others. So that's why I brought it up.
The word that I would ask for in there for clarification, I understand the standing committees, we do that. I understand ad hoc.
Mm-hmm.
But use of the word established to me says that there's a body of people that cumulatively agree that something needs to get done on a limited time basis, and so put a group together for a specific purpose, correct? And then come back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they're established by a body, appointed or whatever, but the body is saying, go do this, come back with this. Not the answer, but with whatever it is that.
Right, the
their purpose is.
recommendation, the report, whatever it may be.
So the one thing I don't see in here, as I look at this, is there ever the ability to get together and pull a body of people together, any one of us as a council member, to do our research on something in order to maybe bring something to the council? Is that prohibited?
When you are trying to meet with a body that has already been established by the council, I would say yes. If you're trying to do your own
Meet
town
with a
hall.
body or members of that body?
Sorry, I'm off. No.
Lisa, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm trying to understand.
I know.
I understand the two that were up there, okay?
Okay. So here's and that part goes into some of this. I want to go through a couple of slides and then I'm going to circle back to your question. So in this governance policy that you guys adopted, it talks about the minimization of the use of subcommittees, partly because it takes away from the whole. In other words, even if you had a subcommittee that asked questions and there was a back and forth conversation, it is this council right now, opinion and adoption of the governance policies, we prefer that it be the whole. We should all be there. So we should be doing these in work sessions and city council meetings so that everybody has the opportunity to hear the same information, ask questions of each other, hear from these people, rather than designate a subcommittee to then come back and report. You're not saying you're against them as a whole, but you are saying here that you want to minimize the use of them. If that makes any sense. You're looking at me kind of funny, do you? Did it not make sense? Okay.
I'm thinking.
Did you have a question? Okay.
But it also says the council may appoint 1 to 3 members.
Yep. When further research on a topic is needed. Yep.
Okay, but again, go back to it, and what I think the intention of that is the subcommittees which are appointed
Yes.
for a purpose, right?
So, yep. So here we go. All right. So we have the home rule charter. Under the home rule charter, the mayor appoints members to the advisory boards, committees, and commissions. Keep in mind that right at this point in the home rule charter, there's no differentiation of ad hoc or sub or standing committee. It's just any committee, okay? We get to the city ordinance and I just noticed this recently in doing this PowerPoint, that this one specifically refers to standing committees. And the open to the public nature of the meetings, the way that this reads is only those committees that are required by ordinance. So this is going to beg the question of, to what extent would you like to change this, council? So first of all, I put in that we would change that to include ad hoc committees, or we could just say may appoint any committee, right? Any and all committees. The other bottom section there is striking out that it's only those committees required by ordinance that would be open to the public. And one of the reasons I struck that out was because I feel like, let's see what the next one is. In your, I believe in your governance policies, there's also just not as specific, but there's relation to just allowing for as much community involvement, openness, you know, that sort of thing in your governance policies. So that's why I struck out the any committees required by ordinance, unless, no, I'm sorry, there's gonna be one caveat. If the purpose of the committee is something that should be closed, and when I get to that, that would be things like a hiring committee, or maybe you're studying cybersecurity for the city, something that would already be by its nature closed, then no, you don't have to open that up for the public. You could create a committee. It could have meetings, closed doors, that kind of thing. So is that where you were going?
No. I appreciate you saying that though. So just to clarify a little maybe confusion here is the mayor could appoint 3 council people to a committee, okay? So this committee has to hold meetings open to the public. So I'm the public. Now that conforms a quorum.
If,
So that allows the other 4 council people are not allowed to attend the things.
right, because then you would have all of you there.
Yeah.
You are correct. Yes, thank you. That was good.
So it's not really open to public. Yes and no.
Yes and no. Open to everyone else but the rest of the council. Okay, then we get to the policies part of this. And let's see here. Order precedence. So policies in general, again, are they legally binding, as in someone will get punished? Like, you know, I get a misdemeanor or something like that? No. But for purposes, again, it goes back to that reference though, in the referendum section of the state statutes, they are giving more weight to a policy adopted by city government than a policy, say, that is internal at a company that just says, you know, I don't know, be on time. I don't know, whatever the policy would be. Now, this kind of goes back to, oh, I'm sorry. So let's circle back to Councilman Danforth's question. If it is one thing to, because obviously council needs to do its job, right? So,
As a body
and am I allowed to use CL as an example? I don't want to,
Yeah.
I don't want to offend, make you
No,
feel like you're getting picked on or
You're never
something.
gonna offend me.
Okay.
I could take one of you.
I like the saying, if there's an elephant in the room,
It's
introduce it.
Okay, so let's say you as council, you're a council person, forget about planning commission for a moment. Let's just say you want to revisit something and have it brought back forth, right? Well, in order to do that, you would probably have to meet with another council person, not in a council meeting, right? And say, hey, man, if I make this motion, will you back me? Will you second my motion? Totally fine. If 3 of council want to meet and get together and over a cup of coffee and talk business and just get each other's thoughts, that's fine because you don't have a quorum. You guys still can't take any action. You can't do anything. You still have to come back to this body and present it as a whole. You're not creating a subcommittee. You're 3 council people getting together to talk issues like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? You don't have a quorum. You can't take any, you don't have any power. You still have to come back to this body. Now, when I reviewed different communications with the planning commission, the problem that I saw is that you are a person is collectively communicating to an entire body. You're not doing it individual, like, hey, I just want to get your thoughts to an individual who may sit on the planning commission. Instead, you are communicating collectively to the whole. So what happens if more than 2 show up? Well, now, or 3 or 4. Well, you think it's a town hall. Well, just like you guys, now you have a planning commission meeting because you have too many people there.
To go to that
Right.
point.
Sorry, I know, I'm looking at it.
He's asking the question that I'm wondering, so let's,
Yeah, he's wondering.
But if you look at the content of that and what's not in there, it's conversations. There's nothing in that email that you're referring to. Because I will tell you, and this is important. I've been on the council for 10 years plus, off and on for 2 years. And I would tell you that with our attorney representation, mayoral representation, the council as a whole, have always been cognizant of doing things properly.
Sure.
Okay, open rules, whatever it is, public noticing, there's never an issue there. And I think that's important. And I'm not trying to shun that responsibility now, right? But within that email, there was zero discussion in regards to any input from them, anything. It was to see who was specifically what would be interested in partaking. And from that, it would be making sure that we don't have a quorum, okay, council or planning commission, okay? So, and that the purpose is it's a research thing. And I'll say from my standpoint, right? So the fact that went out to the full plan commission, I'm sure you were this document, put out by the Attorney General's office, that coordinating, as long as it is a body that is not specifically appointed, okay? And if it's for the purposes of scheduling, then it doesn't apply to the open meeting law. That's what I went by. Because all you're trying to do is coordinate schedule.
Right.
You're not addressing an issue in there, you're not looking for feedback on any issues in there, you're trying to coordinate. That's all that was for, okay? So, does that change it? You're pondering, you're discerning.
No, yeah, because what I'm getting at is, so, first of all, I'd have to read the opinion. Because you have to remember too that you guys did appoint.
No, we didn't.
Yes, you did. And you know how you did? You passed an ordinance that established a planning commission.
This meeting isn't, that's not what this is. This
You
isn't
guys
appointed.
established a body
Yeah.
that has power. It's not even an advisory board.
Okay, I get it, but I'm not meeting with any kind of,
No,
no
what I'm-
decision making.
But what I'm getting at is, so the whole purpose of, you want to get away from circumventing or any appearance of circumventing. And in essence, by communicating to all of them as a whole, to try and get their input on an issue as a whole, when they should be operating, to me, as an independent body recommending to the council. If you want to get information on from a specific planning commission member, then you would just contact that member and be
Okay.
like, hey, what do you think? Otherwise, because remember too, you want to get away from a council person to a certain, there's a fine line. You want to get away from, in my opinion, and I'm sure other attorneys may have a different opinion. You want to get away from influencing another body. Because remember that the planning commission is supposed to be recommending to the council, and then the council is independently reviewing this recommendation. So unless you have already organized, which is also allowed, a joint meeting where you are bringing everyone together, everyone's in the public, everyone gets to hear, everyone gets to interact, to decide on a particular issue and give their, input. So you could do a couple of different things. The planning commission as an independent body can recommend its own zoning ordinance changes to the CL, to anything. Staff could go to them and say, we would recommend that you do this, planning commission, or planning commission could do it on their own, just as council could do it on their own. And then in the ordinance, council, if they're doing it, does have to kick it back to the planning commission. So if you already have certain members of the council meeting over here with the body as a collective, whether or not you're separating it out or trying to do it all at once, are you really allowing this body to be independent in making a recommendation to the council? That's just my initial
But
thoughts on it.
the word that you're using there, which I don't think fits, Lisa, is your use of the word collective.
That's because you emailed them all at once and you didn't say respond to me separately. You didn't say blind copy. You
All
didn't
about
say anything.
scheduling a meeting and see who's interested in partaking in the meeting. That's all that was. There's zero discussion about the issue. Don't wink, please. It's okay.
And no disrespect. I apologize. This is a reaction.
Let's proceed.
Now, but given what Councilman Danforth has said, it's up to you guys to decide, do you want to change any policy related to how you're interacting with other boards and committees?
The state law allows that.
I would say yes, to a certain degree. It depends on what you guys would propose.
So there's that fine line again between home rule charter and state law, so.
So normally under the avenues, right? Councilman Danforth could make a motion to the council, somebody could second it to establish, to revisit CM. They could make a motion to recommend to the planning commission. revisit CL. They could recommend to the mayor to call the joint meeting for the purposes of discussing CL, which is actually what's currently happening. There's all sorts of ways to address it. You just want to get away from any appearance that somehow there's this, you're trying to circumvent the open meeting laws, whether intentional or not intentional. It's the same thing like when we disclose conflict. Sometimes it's not a direct conflict, it's just an appearance of, and you're trying to disclose to make sure that everybody's aware. Similar to that. You just want to make sure that we're not circumventing by individually and then doing it again. But again, at the same time, I understand that in order to do business, you know, people need to figure out what other people are thinking and whether or not there's a desire to do something. I'm just saying do it in small groups.
Does South Dakota have a version of the serial meeting laws? In other states, they actually have laws against, let's say, if I wanted to pursue a subject, let's say the street department. Let's say I'm happy for it or I'm unhappy for it, doesn't matter. I have something I want to find out more, so I call a meeting with Randy. And then later that day, I call a meeting with Councilman Jern, and the next day, Councilman Peters, the next day, Councilman Danforth. Now, those are all separate meetings and none of them reach a quorum, but in these other states, it's called a serial meeting because essentially, you know what you're trying to do. You're trying to get a consensus of the body, but just not all at one time. Does South Dakota have anything like that that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. And remember too, it would have to escalate. So in other words, just by nature of the council, I mean, and again, this is from visiting other communities, right? And I don't know to the extent that you guys do it. I know the mayor does, because he'll talk about, I've talked with different council people and they have a desire for X, so we're gonna put it on the agenda, you know, or something of that nature. So that is how you guys get business done. I mean, we need to appreciate that. I think what, the only reason I say it very cautionary is just because, let's say over a matter of time, we have consecutive council meetings, or it starts to become a theme where we have issues on the table that would seem like there should be a lot of discussion. We go to a council meeting and the entire council is just like, yay, nay, and we're done. There's like no discussion. Then it would start to hint to the public, right, that, hey, what's happening? Because there's no open, there's no discussion. Are they all, you know, and then you get back to just the, whether it's right or wrong or correct or not, then you get back into the public saying, well, wait a minute, you know, now they're meeting again behind closed doors and they're deciding things behind closed doors. Well, that's not true. But if you do it over time where they're starting, you know, these council meetings are starting to get less interactive and more, it's as if you already made up your minds, then yeah, people are gonna start wondering what's happening. Are you guys meeting as a collective? They don't know, you know, and that's kind of what the open meeting laws are meant to protect. But I am very appreciative of the fact that in order for people to get stuff done, they have to be able to talk to one another. And it can't always be in a council meeting, you know, they need to be able to converse and call and say, hey, you know, you looked concerned during that one discussion, what was your concern? You know, I mean, otherwise we'd never get anywhere. And that's a little naive to think that people can't talk to each other. You know, oh, I'm a council member, I can't talk to any other council member unless I'm in a council meeting. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. It's a balance. So.
I mean, is it legal? Yes. Is it how we want to do business? That's the question, because we do have policies that try to avoid splintering off. And I'll actually comment, Steve Jones is in the back of the room, and I made a comment early on when I was mayor that when I decided to run for mayor, it was under the understanding that I needed to abide completely with the new form of government that the citizens of Watertown voted overwhelmingly to do. That was not how I did business as a city council person. But you had to buy into that. And I remember stating early on, I want all of my business to be done above board in public. And then Steve, you actually texted me, well, isn't that the way government should do it? And I go, yeah, it should. It's not always how government does it. And it's a fine line because yes, you can meet with your fellow councilmen. I guess in my own head, if I met with, I'll say like I met earlier today with Councilman Danforth and Councilman Peters. The topic was more, should we address something? As far as like coming up with an actual proposal, we never crossed that line. To just say, is this something we want to explore? Then yes, we came to that conclusion. And then, at least for me, I said, at this point now, we need an actual proposal to go to the council because if the three of us want to have this discussion with the council, then let's make a proposal. I guess that's how I see the difference. And because that at that point, if you're trying to seek a decision of the body, then have that conversation in open, I guess. It's a fine line.
It is.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, I guess to council, please take into consideration that I would rather be stronger as the city attorney and say, don't do X, than to have you misinterpret and get more onto this. We're getting closer to the white than to the black, you know, we're moving too dangerous in the gray. Does that make any sense? I would rather be overly cautious as your city attorney, but by all means, yes, you have to get stuff done. I mean, I think it would be ridiculous to think that you guys couldn't communicate with one another. And in visiting other communities, it's my understanding that the mayor does go around and talk with every council person and find out what's going on and, you know, figure out where they're at on a particular issue, keep them informed, you know, to make sure, do we need to address something at a council meeting or something?
And I'll
of that
pass it
nature?
off to Councilman Jones, but
Yeah.
I mean, City Manager Mack has meetings with several councilmen members at a time, so it's
Yeah.
not completely unheard of. Councilman Jones, sorry.
I'd just like to know Lisa's opinion. Let's just go back to CL.
Okay.
And there are definitely some of those of us that want to see something done, minor, major. We don't know. We want to have the discussion, and as you're saying, to get something done, it's good to have these discussions. And we're now learning, yeah, we knew this, three city councilmen, but are you, in your opinion, are you saying no conversation with planning commission? Or, I mean, there's some people on the planning commission that they've seen a lot of things. They've done a lot of things. They've done a lot of good things. They've seen some
Sure.
mistakes. Are you recommending, in your opinion, one at a time? Or is it okay to have 2, 3, 4 planning commission members at a meeting to just have a round table discussion on some things that look good, that don't look good?
Well, the first and foremost is, the very first thing that I would recommend, right, is just, which I think is occurring, is the joint meeting. Because then you are able to have an open discussion, you're all there, everybody can hear. Some people won't care, some people will, but everybody gets to hear it, because at the end of the day, somebody's got to adopt it, right? Whether it's the planning commission's got to look at it, council's got to look at it, so might as well have everybody there to voice the ins and outs. If you are going to meet with a planning commission member, no, I mean, again, if I was a council person, right, I would want to know what provoked a particular decision, or especially for those who did adopt the CL originally, what was your thinking? You know, why did you guys do this? I would do it individually, no more than 2. That's just my recommendation.
To planning commission.
Right, individual and 2 planning. But again, even if it was 3 of you, like you said, it's technically not a meeting. And if you stayed below the quorum requirement for the planning commission, it's still not a meeting.
I'm like you. I'd like to hear why some of these decisions were made in that zoning ordinance.
Sure.
And I feel maybe they couldn't have seen some of the things that are happening. You know, maybe no one Someone's that good that they can foresee all the little intricacies that can happen.
Well, and
That's why we adopt new ordinances every year. That's why it would appear here to change laws, because just exactly what you're saying, there's something that we passed today does not mean that it's gonna work forever. They need to be changed or studied and changed.
well, and Councilman Danforth put that up in his email to the planning commission. Just that, no, you guys have worked hard on it. I mean, the ones that were there, but again, time has gone by, things are different or not. I mean, again, we all have to be prepared for it. We all have a meeting and nothing happens. But again, that's not for me, that's for you guys and the planning commission to figure out.
What we put on paper today and what we thought is gonna work real good may come out that it don't work real good. We need to be open-minded to be able to change those things. As long as we take one thing into consideration while we're doing it.
Right.
It's the word that's up in the top right-hand corner of that sign, and that's integrity. For both bodies.
One thing to keep in mind too, which you guys already know and you already knew anyway, but just, and I can't remember if I have it in here, is that under your home rule charter, any advisory boards, subcommittees, whatever type of groups organized and called for, the city manager is to take part in those discussions. They don't have a vote necessarily, depending on how you guys have structured something, but they are to be there because, again, you still need staff. And you need to go the complete circle, right? You're gonna need staff to give input on what works or doesn't work for them. You might not agree with it, and you might end up passing something that they don't like, or they, vice versa, but it's a collective.
So where's this at?
It's actually in your home rule charter, but for right now, we're gonna look at another policy that you guys passed. And this is partly, to bring up just communication, just a reminder. So council members, committees, others may request information or assistance without council authorization. This is so that it wasn't going to be cumbersome, right? They don't have to go to every council meeting to say, hey, can I ask the city manager a question? Or I need staff to research something, can I ask the city manager? However, the city manager may then turn back to council for guidance when and if the requests are, it's an inordinate, whatever the task is rather large. So then it's like, okay, council, are you committed to this? Because it's gonna take some time and effort of staff. So if there's only one of you that wants this, you as council need to figure it out and tell me.
Okay, I really like this, but I'll just,
Yep,
let's say if Councilman Tupper has something he's passionate about, contact City Manager Mack. City Manager Mack, without calling an official meeting, how is City Manager Mack supposed to find out if this is a council directive? Because I would say, in my mind, I don't want you emailing each council member for a vote and blind CCing it, because then you create the division, and then you also don't, I guess I was raised,
yes.
my political background is your vote is your voice. So voting, that's why I'm such a stickler for bringing a motion forward, because in the end, it's your vote that matters. It's easy at other times to say, you know what, let's just say CL, because it's like every one of us is in favor of changing it. It's just to what level. So if I'm 49% in favor of changing CL, and then an actual proposal comes forward, but I'm only 49%, I'm gonna vote no, and that's my vote. That's my vote, that's my voice. I have to own that. That's what I wanna try to get to in any policy. So if we're going to be guiding the city manager as a whole, how do we get to that whole if we don't have an official motion?
So, okay, first of all, remember in this particular instance, you are requesting information. So it could just be general stats. It could be how many employees have left. With CL, it could be how many permits do we actually get? You know what I mean? to even rezone to the CL. Like how many been approved, how many been denied, those type of pieces of information. But if a council person said, which to me kind of gets away from requesting information, but it could be under requesting assistance. Hey, I want to change the CL to X, can you help me draft this? Or can staff put this together? Well, then she's gonna come back and she's gonna be like, hey, wait a minute, council, what do you want to do? Because otherwise you're having staff do something that is only the, right at that point in time, desire of one council person, and we need to give her clear direction. Did you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, no, just to emphasize it, assistance could be, hey, like Councilman Danforth, can you connect me with Chris from Confluence? Because I want to talk to him about the process that they went through crafting the Lake Impaska master plan. Asking for, hey, can you find out what other communities are doing around smoke shacks, right? Absolutely, that's part of our job is just research, but okay, from here on out, the police department is not going to enforce the ordinance on smoke shacks. Well, that has to come from the council, right? Like one council person can't just say, no, we're not doing that anymore. Or you all have approved something and then someone who voted against it says, well, I think we need to change it. You need to go research these other things. Well, then I'm going to come back to the council. If you've taken a vote and approved something, and we still have a council person who wants to, who didn't vote in favor of that, who wants to pursue other options. Hey, do you want me spending time on this? Because it's going to take time. What are our options for public facilities, right? We've got the CMAR process, we've got design, build, bid, we've got pre-engineered. What are the statutes say about them? What are the processes that we have to follow? That's wholly appropriate. But staff can't change direction on something we've been doing that you all have given us direction on without you formally changing your direction. That makes sense.
So it was one council, easy way to say it, one council person can't come in and change direction of what the council has said.
Right. Which is pretty, you guys do that.
That's
fine.
common sense.
But what about 3?
It's gotta be 4, like 4 of you, 4 is a majority. So let's use the street facility, for example. The last formal action that this body gave staff was to amend the JLG contract and finish the design. Now, if we want to pursue other options, staff can go out and research them, but you all can't just, okay, let's go do this other process without formally saying we're switching gears and now we're going to do this.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So using that as an example, it's almost a question back to you, council. Because in that situation where there's an indication of change, because they're on a direction, right? And now there's research that could change the direction. But because the last action was do this, my question to you is, because sometimes I feel like this is where the communication gets broken down, is the city manager doing that in her one-on-twos? Or is she telling that person, no, you have to go back to council and change the direction, or at least get a motion to research it? Because of the fact that they're on this path, they've been given a directive and they're gone. Now you're trying to change it, and to what extent do you want the city manager to be able to change that direction? Because that is a more research and effort when you guys did make a decision. So now do you, at what point, and it's not a good or bad, I'm saying, what do you want her to do? Do you want the city manager to do it in this like informal way? Or, because that is something where it falls in there, but it's kind of a little more heightened. So to what extent would you want her to come back? And you don't have to answer right now. I'm just saying that is a very good example though to me, that you need to be clear, because otherwise, and I don't want to speak for the city manager, I'm only assuming she doesn't know what to do. Or she'll obviously communicate with the council, you know, individually, like, hey, what do you really, but then the person who's requested, is it her responsibility to come back and be like, well, I vetted it through the rest of them and they don't want to do that? That's not really fair either, because you guys haven't had an interaction about it.
Easiest, most proper way to do that is if we want to change directions, is to find another council person to ask for it to be put on the agenda and take it back to council. Because.
Or is it a
Yeah.
bad
reality
example?
is
No,
I'm just
no,
saying.
I think that that's, so the, like, I think everybody understands the formal changing of direction. It's the behind the scenes work to get to the point where if you're gonna decide to change direction or not. And, I mean, I think it's wholly appropriate to ask myself, you know, hey, what's it look like if we were to go this other process? You know, we did, what's it, is it design bid build? Sorry.
One of them.
One of them, yeah, you know, we did that with Wells Fargo versus CMAR on, the ice arena. And so what would be a better option? Well, and now we've been talking about pre-engineered buildings. You guys can do a pre-engineered building, but you gotta follow a process, and we don't know what that process is yet, so we gotta research it. But until someone says, hey, I really think we should research what pre-engineered building options are, like, we're just gonna keep going on the path that you told us to keep going.
Well, because
You know.
that's the path that the council gave.
Right.
In order to change that path.
To change the
should
path,
take
yeah,
that.
it should be in some
And
kind of
if we want to
formal
look at
manner.
both of them, there should be an amendment to the original path.
It might just be the construction speak that's in my mind, but JLG have designed us what will become a pre-engineered metal fabricated building. Just so that we don't get terms cross or confused. I just wanted to make that point. They are designing us a pre-engineered metal fab building.
Okay. We're not debating the street department.
No.
No, but I
I think it's a
appreciate,
good
But no,
example
I mean, I
because,
understand.
because like, I hear chatter from all of you that, well, we went and looked at this one and there's frustration because we haven't brought you a plan to go build for example, a Morton building. Well, no one's told me to do that. If that's what you want to do, well, we'll go do it. But you guys talk about it and then it doesn't get relayed in any kind of collective way back to me to direct staff.
Sure.
And so that's part of where we can just, I don't know, be more
And then
intentional.
you and or staff can be judged based upon lack of performance upon something that wasn't an official action.
Right.
Okay.
and
I'm going to be contacting council. I know a couple of different motions that we'd like for Monday, so. I got two quick.
yes, sir.
So I'll break my silence.
Amanda, at the January 2nd council meeting, when this discussion took place about the CL, your suggestion was for a council person or two council people to go out and to bring back language amendments for the CL. Recall that?
I don't, it was 2 months ago, but you've got a recording, so I'm sure it's accurate.
What was your intention with that? What was your intention of how a council person could or should do that?
I thought you'd bring a motion.
How do you get the language? That's the motion's the easy part.
Yeah.
What about the language, the content that ultimately would be considered by the council?
I guess my assumption would have been, because when we went through the previous amendments, I know Councilman Bueller spent quite a bit of time with our community development manager, talking through his ideas and kind of what he had frustrations with and what he wanted to see, and she helped craft some language. I also assumed that there are some clear things. Councilman Jurgens has said the campgrounds give him heartburn. And so there were some clear things that you wanted to see amended. I thought we just kind of followed that process. I thought you had an idea on what you wanted the language to be.
But not a full body making that decision. It's you're recommending, let's just say my friend Kyle, and I want to propose something.
Then you bring it forward and the body vets it out. I mean, that's,
Correct. But my point is that he and I gotta have a means to generate the logic of what goes into a proposed ordinance change, right, language change. That's the question is what's an expectation of how that can be done? Do we search it? Can we do our homework to understand the history, to understand what we want to present? Because whatever gets presented gets vetted from every aspect for completeness or whatever it all is at the council level, right? Because we got first reading, second reading, you got the planning commission who goes through it. So it's all gonna get vetted. So the question is that preparatory work, that's the question that I have is how do we go about doing that then effectively?
Well, there's a few different ways, I guess you can do it. You can form a committee to study it. You can work with staff and say, here are the areas, even if you don't know what you want the language to say, you know, the community development staff and public works staff, this is what they do all day, every day. I don't like campgrounds. Hey, here are a bunch of different things we can do with the campgrounds, and then you guys decide what you like and what you don't like. I mean, I'm not understanding why you couldn't just go call Blake from the Plan Commission and have a conversation with him. I mean, I don't think anyone has said that you couldn't, or anyone from the Plan Commission for that matter. But where we, have run into challenges with this is, and partly why when I sent my email out about a month ago about forming the committee is that, and I shared this with you, what people are telling you are not the same thing that they're telling me, and they're not the same thing that they're telling the mayor. And in order to figure out where everyone lands, let's just get everyone together and figure out how you want to go forward. If you want to have a committee, then form a committee and we'll facilitate that process. If nobody wants to talk about any of it, well, then we know. That's.
Yeah, can I add some value to that discussion? Based on conversation with planning commissioners that have talked to staff about this issue, I think a good example, real life example, is their hesitancy to broach the subject without knowing there is a majority consensus that the council wants to broach the subject. So a simple solution to that in my mind would be that this body has a discussion, either collectively with the planning commission or on your own at your own meeting, to have a majority of you simply take a vote or have a head nod to say, yes, we want to broach the subject again. I think that is, to Councilman Danforth's point, the simplest starting point to say, this is something that the majority of this body wants to entertain. That then triggers the planning commissioners to say, okay, this is all not going to be for naught. This is going to be a valid effort because they know you as the governing body are in agreement to explore it.
I would even add on to that because, and I know where you're going, but so what I want to try to avoid is this game of telephone that can happen with these subcommittees or however with the conversation, because depending, if I have a conversation with Councilman Peters one day, might get a completely different answer than what I get the next week based upon information or a meeting he had or something. I guess for me, it goes back to make it in public and vote on it, because that way you're on record. Because otherwise it's easy. I mean, I'm pretty certain that I have had a conversation with different people in this community that have told me completely different things than what they've told other councilmen and vice versa. And so the way to get out of that is to put everyone on record, make them vote. And I know, I mean, and that just requires a motion, do it in public, make them vote, because that way you know what people think. and you know the direction that they're saying. I'm just saying, I'm not against what is being expressed here, but I guess it's just to what level we go. So.
That's maybe a comment to touch on Mr. Von Ey's comment just a second ago. And I won't disclose who it was, but a couple different members of the Plan Commission have told me they're all for sitting down and talking it over and looking it over. Only if, whenever we come to a solution, that the council's willing to live by that solution, which I think in times we haven't. So in other words, they're saying, why waste their time if we're not all going to live by the same rules?
And that goes back to.
But that's
Yeah, and I know council has heard me say this multiple times as staff. I do not accept that as testimony.
Yep.
Because you drop in, but the thing is, I actually have had conversations with the Plan Commission who have told me the same thing. But even then, I will not allow that as evidence because it is hearsay. Until you can name that person and have that person come forward and defend their statement, it's still just, it's hearsay. And I guess wouldn't be admissible in a court of law and,
I'm not offended by that.
yeah. No, and that's just an example, so. Sorry.
No, not totally embellishing on that, but it just keeps something in my head. So I did go to a professional improvement thing with Public Works Director and
Was it
City
to
Manager.
trap the budget?
Huh?
Too soon?
Down
It
in-
was.
Too soon.
It was. I think the mayor met us there.
is some people are crockpot thinkers. That's the one thing that I always take back. Some people are crockpot thinkers. So you have a discussion and initially they're like, yeah, or no. And then, they have time to think about it, ruminate, ponder,
I think that's part of the difference because.
Some people are instantaneous and they just know, and others, they have to ruminate a little, so. All right, so we have this asking for information, assistance. So one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about the policies is because they are guidelines, and it is also how the city manager is, it is part of their being evaluated. Because your policies are basically guidelines for the city manager to know how to achieve the goals of what council wants. In doing so, and I don't want us to harp on it too much, but obviously there would be times where there might be non-compliance with a policy, in which case it would be short-term. City manager would notify the council, and depending on what the policy was, either there was an isolated incident, or is it something that we now need to change the policy? But most of those, I read through the policies, I hadn't read them way back, but looking at them now with a crockpot thinker, and a lot of them, you really are guiding administration into, these were our goals, this is what's important to us, here's what we want you to do, go and do it.
Manager back.
So one, as it relates to non-compliance, so an example that one of my city manager friends gave is they had a donation policy that required anything over X amount of dollars had to go in front of the city council, which has been public. But they had a donor who was going to give above that, who was not going to give if their name was going to be made public. And so the manager went to the council and said, hey, our policy says this, but I think we need to deviate from it because we're going to lose this donation. Council gave the nod, and then they went and amended the policy. So it's not to say, oh, we just didn't feel like following it today. There's, specific items that may come up that you just aren't thinking about when the policies are crafted. But that was a very specific example that I was given when we were researching these different governance policies.
Another point to that was that, I know, matter of fact, I know as Councilman Danforth brought it up at the last meeting, our policies on the sidewalks. And in some of these older neighborhoods, our policy might just not fit anymore. So, it's something that we need to look at policies all the time. Do they actually still fit? And And
I do think your governance policies call for an annual review, so all of them at least would be reviewed once a year.
They do. I read it today.
Okay.
All right, so this policy is basically just reiterating that when you're giving direction to the city manager, must be taken through a motion, vote, public meeting. Now, you're melding that though, right, with just the day-to-day operations where, for lack of a better phrase, the city manager is taking the temperature of council and just informing you guys what's going on. But for the most part, your policies, your ordinances, and your strategic plan are providing her with enough direction to operate the day-to-day operations until such time as a true, approval needs to be done by the council. General powers, this is from the state statute. Again, they're entitled to be present at all meetings of the governing body, its committees, and to take part in the discussions. They have the right to prepare and introduce ordinances and resolutions, but have no vote. And then, of course, there's always the catch-all. Any further powers and duties that you guys prescribe for the city manager by ordinance or resolution?
can it be politically correct?
With the he and the she?
What's that?
Yes, that was from the state statute. I was like, I thought about changing it to she, and I said, nope, that's what it is. So, one of the things that come up is in this past year. So I just wanted to highlight some stuff and kind of plant the seed with council. To what extent are you, if you guys are clear internally about what you want the mayor to do and how you want the mayor to do it, great. But if not, I would suggest getting clear a little bit. So generally speaking, the mayor has, and this is in the charter, right, has duties as a council member, power to vote, presides at the meetings of the city council. We consider the mayor the chair. Represent for intergovernmental relationships and appoints boards, committees, commissions, gives the annual state of the city message, and then any other duties as assigned. This in part goes to just communication and partly whether it's CL, street facility, whatever it is that you guys are changing of direction, that sort of thing. To what extent are you relying on the mayor to convey to the city manager? And to what extent are you guys conveying to the city manager individually that is outside of a council meeting and motion? And the reason I say that is because the city manager has to juggle what, who knows what and who's cool with what and who's willing to move forward with what. And sometimes I think that there are members of the council that think, well, I said it to the mayor, so of course it went to the city manager. But did you say to the mayor, tell the city manager, or did you just talk and vent or have an idea to the mayor that you thought was gonna get? Or did you tell the mayor to say it?
Back to his point of hearsay.
Right. And if one of you conveys something to the city manager, then as of right now, the city manager is basically trying to vet all of you. Is this what you want, or is this the direction you want to go? But then who's conveying that back to the person who initially asked? Are we saying that it's the city manager? Are we saying that it's the mayor? I feel like there's a lot of, I'm not saying that there's bad communication right now. I feel like most of everything's getting accomplished, but every once in a while, I just kind of think, I just feel like there's a communication breakdown. And so just kind of getting clear with each other how you want that to work. And I'm not saying we need to micromanage each other and have it in writing. I'm not a big fan of excessive rules, but I'm just saying get clear with each other. And the mayor has new administrative duties. I did not actually bold the note. My staff did. I just want to put that out there. My staff did that.
So it's your staff that does that.
So then by city ordinance, we also have mayor's duties. So this is apart from the home rule charter. Again, chairs, And mostly it has to do with how the meetings are conducted. Appoints persons to any standing. Of course, I added ad hoc because I had promoted that we put that revision in Title VII. And then obviously appoints to a city board or commission and provides those nominees 10 days prior. But that's all, folks. Unless you have any other questions.
I think it was all good discussion.
That's all I want at this point.
All right. Item B is the city sidewalk policy discussion and staff direction.
You're up, sir.
Thank you, Lisa.
Now, we're just gonna get going now.
As long as you're fast, that seems silly.
I'm kind of torn because it's the order that people might say longer.
Okay, fair enough. I saw a meme the other day, Kyle, and I immediately thought of you. It said, I'm now at the age where if I get a text message at 10:15 at night, I answer at 5 o'clock in the morning. I think that's Kyle.
Yes, they like Monday, Tuesday, it's hard, it's mental.
Your bubblers on your fast.
Well, the longest I ever made it was 5 days.
Why?
You did spiritual guidance.
It does wake you up.
Yeah, it's the mental clarity.
We're in your daily diet.
Just at ball games and city council meetings. By the way, the Jacks play at 6. Oh, don't, nobody say that. The mayor does not like.
Attorney Jericho, while Director Von Nye is calling something up, I had a question. It was on one of your last slides. It was,
That's all,
okay, the
folks.
state statute, city manager, general powers.
Yes.
So the opening line is, except when the governing body may be considering his removal, the manager, first off, it would be his removal or he be removed. That's proper English, but what is the mechanism for removing the city manager from a discussion from the council? It's the council makes that vote to ask the city manager to be removed, but the topic has to be about the city manager, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And it is just then a majority vote. Okay,
Yes.
okay. I
And
just wanted
obviously
to make
advising
sure.
the executive session as well.
Okay. Thank you. Director Von Nye, you ready?
I think so. Okay, so first item I think was sidewalks.
Sidewalk policy.
The policies or protocol that we've got in place on how we address sidewalk throughout the city. So I've got a few different documents here that I'll share to the screen and talk through what staff has as guidance for sidewalk as of right now. The first document I've got here is the transition plan that was established back in 2007. I think this was discussed at the 12th Avenue sidewalk resolution of necessity meeting. And essentially, I don't know all the details about this, but I know the city had some form of suit filed against us for more or less not paying attention to ADA curb ramps and the requirements that the feds have put into place for those to be installed. So this policy, this transition plan, drilled down to some pretty good level of detail of the requirement to install, repair, retrofit curb ramps and sidewalks within the public streets and right-of-ways. Now, this first paragraph right here in this document really is the only place that references sidewalks. The rest of the document is more specific to curb ramps. And it cites, where curb ramps are necessary, any construction project of a certain magnitude in a street that by federal law requires us to put in curb ramps. It talks about that. And it even drilled down into the locations at the time and had a plan year by year, all the way up, I think, to 2012. Yeah, where it listed where we would install curb ramps and the detectable warning panels within those curb ramps. So that's one of the first documents that we have to work from. The next document we have is in city ordinance. Chapter 18 of city code states that sidewalks shall be required for all new construction after the effective date of this ordinance. So how this has been generally applied is for the construction, new development on any lot that does not include sidewalks. So if we have a new residential subdivision come in, for example, through the design review team meeting, if sidewalks not shown, we would let them know that's a requirement for the developer and or the subsequent home builders to install that sidewalk. Councilman Tupper.
I got a question. Is there a different ordinance for R1C?
No, not to my knowledge.
Not to pick on these guys, but the whole development out by Derby Downs, there's not a sidewalk.
In Prairie Haven.
Yeah.
I don't remember if we allowed an exemption there. Do you recall, Justin? Brandy's.
I just noticed that yesterday. I drove through there, look at it, and I thought, it's kind of strange, new development without sidewalks. I thought maybe it was allowed under, or that's an R1C, right?
So the next document I was going to pull up actually partly addresses your question. These are the engineering design standards that are adopted by ordinance. Chapter 8.4, the engineering design standards, the sidewalks shall be constructed on both sides of all roadways unless specifically waived by the council. So there have been subdivisions like Dakota Commons, east side of town, where they, Mills Development out of Brookings, they've done developments like that in Brookings where they have meandering pathways in the backyards of their subdivisions down there. That's how they initially proposed and how they initially carried out some of their first phases of the Dakota Commons subdivision off their east of 19th Street. Well, some years later, now as new phases have come in, the Planning Commission and the council, as they brought those plans forward, have said, nah, we don't like that. We want front yard sidewalk like our conventional subdivisions have. So there is latitude where via the Planning Commission's recommendation, ultimately up to the council to give leniency or leeway or amend those requirements on a per subdivision basis. I would have to look up Prairie Haven to see what we've done there. It could just be that they're not installed yet.
All the handicap corners are done.
Okay. I'm guessing they're just not installed yet in that case.
I did reach out to Brandy, but I haven't gotten a response yet, so.
Oh, it's not something that's the answer now. I mean, I was curious that day when I drove through there, just like.
So
handicap park or handicap sidewalks without kind of place to go.
So from that 2007 transition policy to city ordinance to the engineering design standards, and then the final document, the fourth document here is the master transportation plan that we updated in 2020. Has a section in here about pedestrian connectivity and sidewalks. This study went fairly in depth too, as far as where gaps are in our sidewalk network. And you'll see them highlighted here. And they classify them into two tiers. The green line, when you zoom in on this map, you can see more detail about where sidewalks are missing. The green lines are what they would call tier 1. And this study tells us what tier 1 sidewalks are. I believe it has to do with access to government buildings, schools, and neighborhoods of that nature. Tier 2 sidewalks are more your common residential, commercial type of applications. And then also in this study,
So,
oh, yeah, go
when
ahead.
you go back to that, why is there green around the lake? Would that be the bike trail?
That is
classified
existing,
as-
that's existing trail. Yeah, there's a couple different green codes in here. So the thin line green is missing sidewalks, which would be this green in here. But that thick green, that's expressing an existing trail is what that is. The other point I was gonna make in this transportation plan, the tier 1 sidewalks, they actually put together a cost estimate for all the infill at the time in 2020. If we were gonna wake up tomorrow and decide to do all that work, it costs to the tune of $9.7 million. So that just gives you an indicator of the magnitude of sidewalks that are missing throughout the community's sidewalk network.
That was dated when?
This is 2020.
That was 2007 still. I was like, oh geez, big number.
So with that, those are the 4 documents that staff have been utilizing to consider when sidewalk is administered on projects. The general rule of thumb is that on any street we construct, we try to incorporate sidewalk where it does not exist in order to accomplish some of this infill. In order to do that, then we follow the statutory guidelines and processes for sidewalk assessments, which of course we pay for that cost up front and then assess those costs back to the property owners. Then the property owners have the option to pay that up front at the time the assessment is filed or over a 10-year period through their tax bill over 10 years. We've got a number of examples of locations throughout town the last handful of years where sidewalk has been assessed or sidewalk has not been assessed. It all comes down to the physical constraints that we have to work with on the site when we're reconstructing a road. I asked Justin Peterson, city engineer, and his staff to compile a list of those locations recently. And each and every one of them are unique, and each and every one of them have examples why sidewalk was installed and why it was not installed. So the latest example, of course, was 12th Avenue, where there weren't many physical constraints as far as property grades that would require us to build expensive retaining walls and things of that nature. Where staff went ahead and had that planned and programmed to be installed with the reconstruct of that project. And I know 12th Avenue is the next item on the list, but I will show you in advance of that specific discussion. These maps here, the orange represents existing sidewalk, and these are factors that staff also take into place and into consideration as well. So the blue, of course, is the limits for the 12th Avenue reconstruct, and all these orange lines are existing sidewalks throughout that neighborhood. So you can see, just looking at it from a connectivity standpoint, that's where staff felt it was logical to go ahead and extend sidewalk along this route. So you have that east-westerly connectivity to all these north-south streets that already have sidewalk existing. It is a community decision, just like unfolded at the resolution of necessity meeting where the public hearing was held. And so part of this discussion, I think that's important, is that we as staff and a city council establish, try to, it gets difficult because every project's different circumstance, but try to establish as objective criteria as we can. But at a minimum, what I want to do with my staff is back up the cart a little bit here so that we get any proposed new sidewalk installations in front of the council before we go to the extent of, like we did on 12th, designing it, issuing the resolution of necessity, giving the property owners notice. We obviously don't want to go to all that work if the governing body is not in favor of sidewalk at that location. So at a minimum, that's what we're going to do administratively, is get some things checked off as far as sidewalk assessments are concerned. before we get too far into the design process.
Is there maybe a grading, some kind of grading curve you could use on that to see the importance or what does fit, what doesn't fit?
Yeah, there's a multitude of factors we can look at. Grade is one of them where,
I'm not talking about land grading, I'm talking about, here, this is
Scoring.
70%, we should put a sidewalk in here. These are the
Gotcha.
reasons.
yeah.
100%.
And then how to establish that rubric would be the key, because you could use existing sidewalk network as a factor. You could use physical grading constraints as a criteria. You could use existing setbacks like we ran into on our discussion with 12 as a constraint and a consideration. Why we didn't include it on the south side of 10th Avenue a few years ago was for that same reason, driveway obstruction. And by ordinance, you can't park a car and block a sidewalk. Well, if we put a sidewalk in when the driveways are too short, we're creating all these non-compliant driveways and these hardships in that respect. That's why on 5th Avenue Southeast, behind Burger King, there's a series of mobile home structures there. Had we installed it on that project, every one of those driveways would have become illegal when used because their cars would be blocking the new sidewalk that we put in. So that's another example where staff just made that decision at that time. This doesn't make sense here. We kept it out of that project. So that's a 5 and dime summary, Mayor.
Director Von Eyne, do you want to just continue and talk about C and D as well? Because I'm guessing that council will appreciate only needs to talk about all the issues at one time.
Yes, absolutely. We do that. I believe C was 12th Avenue specifically, so I've got some existing proposed street plans here for that project. So this is on the westerly end of the project up on 12th Avenue, and as we pan down through these pages, you'll see we'll move easterly through the project. But at the far west end, you have 6th Street Northwest. If you keep going north here, it ties into 14th Avenue, just to give you some context on where we're at. Sunset Street to the east of here. On each page, I've got what's called a typical section, street section, what it exists out there today, and the proposed street section. So as you recall, I guess the biggest question that came up with the street on this project was the street width. It's designed to go in at 34-foot width, back of curb to back of curb. The main driving force behind that is that on the east end, we've got very narrow right of way. It's only 36 feet wide. So our actual road on that east end is just outside the right of way. Now, why it's only 36 feet, that's anybody's best guess, but that's what we have to deal with. It's very narrow right of way. So staff decided that that would become the driver to run a uniform street width from the east all the way west, so that curb line is straight through with each intersection, and we don't have all the varying widths. This chart here shows what those current widths are. Again, starting on the west end, you've got 40 feet for the first 2 blocks, and then you got roughly 36 feet for the next 2 blocks, and then it widens back out to 37 feet, roughly 36 to 37 for the next 2 blocks. And then all the way through to the end, you're holding that roughly 36, 37 feet. And down here is where we run into those right-of-way constraints, so narrowing it up to 34 made sense. Why 34 was chosen, there's a few different reasons. In our engineering design standards, 33 feet 4 inches. It's an odd number because of our curb widths. That is the minimum we can have to allow for parking on one side of the street. It takes up to 40 feet to allow for parking on both sides. So this whole stretch technically shouldn't be allowing parking on both sides. It's my understanding it is not signed today. We do not prohibit parking on either side from a formal legal aspect that would be enforceable by the police department. So by our engineering design standards, we weren't compromising the ability and the use of that street from an on-street parking standpoint. But they would still retain the ability to park on one side with 34 foot the whole stretch.
So right now, they can only park on one side of the street.
According to our design standards, but not according to how it's marked. I'm guessing we're getting parking on both sides out there because it's not signed prohibited.
But when this is done, it's on one side.
Correct. Yeah. The minimum street width to park on both would be the 40 feet that we do have on the far west 2 blocks. We do
So
have-
what happens when you take, like it goes from,
You know, the wide part, and then you're narrowing it to conform. What happens with that? Does it just turn into boulevard, lawn? Is it up to their, do they increase their site, or not their site, their, property boundaries?
Yeah,
Or is that just city property?
yeah. So if you take the most extreme change on the far west end where it was 40 feet, that's where the red curb and gutter is shown here and in here. If you move that into 34 feet, all the rest of that just becomes more green space. And in this case, it's still within the right of way, but would get absorbed into their yards, their side yards, their front yards, whatever the case might be. This sidewalk is grayed in. That has been pulled out of the project, obviously, from the last council action to reject that resolution of necessity. But we wanted to keep it grayed in here just for reference on where that would have been located for each one of these streets as we move along the project. But I'm guessing they had maybe 7 feet of boulevard, which would be, from the property line to the old curb, to the current curb and gutter. Now they ended up with 13 feet.
So what's the benefit to narrowing the road? Is it just conformity?
Conformity, consistency throughout that street network as vehicles driving it from one end to the other. Those are the two main points. Maintenance as well. When you get rid of additional street width anywhere in town, actually we'll be talking about that on the last item, 7th Avenue. That's the main driving force behind that reconstruct, is to right size the street because it's hugely wide in an area that it doesn't need to be. You're taking out some of the surfacing that we otherwise have to maintain in perpetuity. So that right sizing over time becomes pretty invaluable over the entire street network. Anytime we take an opportunity to minimize it, right size it, we're taking dollars out of the pavement management program for years to come.
Not only that, when you say maintenance, I can imagine running a later in winter months and you're 40 foot and down to 36 foot. That curb don't move very far, so.
You've done this?
I've cleaned a few laps, so I've been a few places, so.
As you go east up the hill on 12th, again, the right of way varies now. We're down to 50 foot right of way. The existing road width is 36.4. That's the red line. The green line shows where the new 34 foot. So if you look at it on an area like this, I mean, the impact is going to be pretty negligible, especially with this location. You're losing a foot on each side of the road. Once that's reconstructed, I doubt anybody will really effectively notice that change.
Can you go to the wider part?
Yeah.
Show that.
Yeah.
Oh, no worries.
Let's go down here. So again, the red line is existing back curb, and the green would be the new.
So it's coming, the center of the road will still be the center of the road.
Correct. Yeah.
So your statement earlier where they went from 7 foot to 13 would not be correct. They're gonna gain 3 feet on each side.
No, that 7 was actually on each side. So because in this case, it's narrowing
So
quite a bit.
you're not gonna gain 6 because you're only taking 6 out of the total. So it'll be 3 on each side. Correct.
No, because you're losing 16 feet total.
So it's
Or,
almost
excuse me.
10 on each side. If I'm looking at this right away correctly, 60 goes from 60 to 40.
Yeah, let me look at this again. So we've got 13 feet of boulevard after the new So this must not be put into scale. So yeah, you're right, it would just be the net difference.
3 feet on each
With-
side.
Yeah,
Still they're gaining 3 feet of properties.
yeah.
So for those in the community that are questioning, why are we narrowing? It's
Uniformity.
cost and uniformity. Maintenance, initial cost, uniformity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. You know, some.
I'm not in Ward B,
So
but I still get the calls. I don't know why.
some concessions,
I forwarded your number.
Well, actually, Director Von Eyck, is there a section in town that is not impacted by this? I mean, I'm guessing where Councilman Danforth and I live in the northeast part of town, a lot of that is new, but I believe that there's at least some places without sidewalk.
Mine and Dan's area.
Yeah. But I was actually just curious if there is a section of town.
that would actually, you mean as far as sidewalks specifically?
Yeah, anyway, we can move on because it's like, even if it isn't, this isn't like a one-off situation.
Yeah, so this map here, pink,
Yeah,
every part of town's got some areas in it, you know, with exception of the northeast, it's the most minimal because it's the newest. Every section of town's got pink highlighted here, and that pink is where there is no sidewalk.
yeah.
So no matter where we go with our road reconstructs, we're gonna be bumping into areas, most generally. In
Yeah,
every ward,
Where I live, there's no curb and gutter, no sidewalk.
yeah.
Can you email those graphs to us, or those?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whenever you get time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You want me to jump on the 7th, Mayor? Or wait till you
Yes.
get back? Okay. So, let's see here. I'll start on this drawing here. So 7th Avenue Southeast. This is from Highway 81 west for about 3 blocks. This blue hatched area. So right on the north side of Walgreens there, coming west of Highway 81 is where we're looking at. Again, this orange lines represent existing sidewalk. This is undergoing a street reconstruct. If you recall, I think it was immediately west of here. We reconstructed how many blocks?
Milton overlay
Or how far?
till the end, so it's like 10 blocks maybe.
Also, so from here west, we did a mill and overlay just last year, about 10 blocks. And we held off on this part because if I zoom
Is that
in.
Walgreens East then?
I'm sorry,
You're saying from the corner of Walgreens East?
Walgreens west. Here's Walgreens right here. So from there west for three blocks total, 2 blocks west of the Walgreens corner. This street was just awkwardly wide, particularly in this middle block, and didn't have good definition. If you go drive this now today, you'll see, because all this perpendicular parking coming off the road here and here, I think there was a lot of curb and gutter missing along this stretch on the south side. And so we just wanted to make a uniform street width and reconstruct this whole thing. Mainly because the mill and overlay wasn't adequate for the distresses that it has, and also to right size it, make it a little more definitive. So with that, we also were looking at adding sidewalk, and this I would look for direction from the council on before we finalize the plans for this one. This one is not out to bid yet, is that correct, Justin?
Not yet.
Okay. So we are planning to add sidewalk to this 3-block stretch. And that, of course, would be assessed back to the property owners. So this is at 2nd Street Southeast, and then going east to 3rd, and then to 4th.
That section is.
And here, it's already installed on the Walgreens property here.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Von Eyck, is, I think only the far west block of that has any residential on it.
It appears so based on this aerial, yeah. These two lots,
And are
not
they
sure.
zoned
I- this-
commercial or?
Oh, by the Salvation Army. The
Yeah,
old
Salvation Army.
Okay.
Then in Davis's property to the south and to the north.
So again, if you go back to the sidewalk map, here's the orange with all the existing sidewalk.
You only really got a block of residential in it.
Is that Walgreens on the bottom right?
This is, yeah,
McDonald's.
yeah.
The old Citron clinic.
And the north side's the Drake. The old-
Drake's across from McDonald's, right, or
Sorry.
behind, or north of McDonald's.
Yeah.
This one. Do you recall, Justin, how much we're narrowing the street here?
This one. What is it, 41, 39.
41 to 39, is that what you said?
Believe so.
We're installing it to our minimum parking two sides, standard street width, which is, I just call it 40 for simplicity.
So will there be curb and gutter put in?
Yeah.
Yeah. Property owner's expense or city expense?
This was all planned to be as part of the project, is that right, Justin?
That's typically city expenses.
I think some of it was reconstructed, that definitely would be. I think a good amount of this along here was reconstructed, curb and gutter.
Justin, yes, sir.
Just want to correct myself. It's existing is 46 feet, and we're going down to 41, which matches to the west.
Yeah, so the dimension down here that we just milled and overlaid last year would be carried on through all the way to Highway 81. But at this intersection, it really opens up quite a bit. From 41 up to 46. So a little bit of street narrowing to our minimum parking on both sides width, and then propose to install sidewalk these 3 blocks. I think everywhere with exception to here where it exists on Walgreens and across the street, we fill in this segment, but the rest of this is already paved and perpendicular parking. So we can't run it through those stalls either, so it would drop off right here. But then all the rest of this would include the sidewalk as grade, represented in the gray lines here. And Justin, have there been any notices sent to these property owners yet at this point?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. Some of the context on recent projects, find it here. So 3rd Avenue North, we did a major street reconstruct and mill and overlay from Highway 20 all the way east to 3rd Street Northwest. And that, of course, included a new bridge. This project was a couple years ago. We went ahead and installed sidewalk on both sides of that and was assessed, some of which was already existing. So obviously we didn't mess
You
with
said
that.
3rd Avenue, right?
3rd Avenue. Yeah.
What was the legal term called that happened at Thompson Heating and Cooling? He refused years ago.
Right of-
Right of first, it wasn't right of first refusal, it was right,
Right to waiver and protest.
yeah,
Is
Oh,
that what that is?
Yeah.
Yes.
waiver right to protest.
yeah.
Yeah.
He had
Because,
one executed on his property.
yeah, like a long time ago, he had signed that, and then when we came back in to put the sidewalk in, he hated it because it was very expensive, but he signed that years ago,
Nice, I've signed one before.
yeah.
It's the only way to get my building permit.
Yeah, because your house doesn't have a sidewalk.
No, when it does, when it comes up next, yeah.
So that's another,
I was not city attorney at the time when
Side
I
note.
created, believe you me.
those waivers of right to protest are documents that we intentionally try to execute as much as we catch it, when folks come in for a building permit or what have you, and we realize there's no sidewalk there, knowing there's a chance we could, as a community, want to go install it, we'll have them execute a waiver right to protest. And I don't know if, actually, it's a good point, I don't know if we checked to see how many residents on 12 had one of those, if any at all. Did we look at that, Justin?
We didn't know.
I think the most recent one of those was that property out on the west side of the lake, the Sugar property, where they, on that road that heads west. Because it's not paved and they had to sign one.
Oh, yeah. So all that new development, we're pretty proficient at making sure we require those waivers of right to protest. So we don't run into those issues where people are coming to protest when we as a community decided we want to put sidewalk in. Just makes the process easier.
Development goes beyond that, and then it's kind of.
Certainly does help, yeah.
10th Avenue, I mentioned earlier, we only put it on the north side. The south side, that project, as you recall, is very contentious. We were widening 10th Avenue. We went through several iterations with residents in that neighborhood to land on where we did with the street width. They agreed and we agreed that we would build it with 2 through lanes and a center turn lane with no parking on either side. So that's how it was built and marked and striped. In order to accomplish that, one of the concessions was to not install a sidewalk on the south side. Part of the reason, not only is a negotiation factor, but also, again, there were a handful of residents along there where we would make their garages, their driveways to their garages unusable because their vehicles parked outside their garage would be blocking the sidewalk. So that's 10th Avenue. 5th Avenue Southeast down by Burger King. We elected not to do sidewalk on that on the north side because of the mobile homes that exist. There were 10 driveways, 6 out of those 10 would have become unusable because of the sidewalk location. On the south side, the biggest issue we had was the parking near Wells Fargo. Again, kind of like the parking north of Walgreens, it's perpendicular. Can't run a sidewalk through there, all that perpendicular parking becomes unusable. So 5th Avenue Southeast, we did not install or assess any sidewalk for those reasons. That's just on the north side of Burger King there. 8th Avenue Southeast by McDonald's. Sidewalk was installed on the north side for a stretch there. The south side, we ran into physical grading constraints where we would have had to have likely build some modular block retaining walls because it just drops off.
That would have been that side where the old Burger King, or not Burger King, but Country Kitchen was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
but
so,
it comes down like this.
exactly. And so we try not to create hardships for the property owners to pay more to put in a retaining wall and a sidewalk. So we just forewent that location for any new install. We also don't like to install retaining walls in the city's right of way unless there's really good reason to. And there's certain locations that it is fair and appropriate to, but generally what happens is it becomes the city's to own and maintain in perpetuity. And that's one more thing that we're out fixing retaining walls that are leaning in over time and things like that. So the physical constraints there on 8th prevented some of that from being installed. 7th Avenue Northeast. So that already existed on the north side.
Can't see your screen if you're trying to share.
No, I'm just reading my list here.
Just trying to politely say they don't want to look at your picture.
I don't have that on the map, so I apologize, but 7th Avenue Northeast is from Highway 81 going east, where we reconstructed that last year. So the north side, was that all existing, Justin?
Actually, south side was existing.
South side was existing.
Yep.
We did not install it on the north side for 2 reasons. One, budget constraints. We didn't have the upfront funds to put that into that reconstruct project last year. And 2, we plan on going back and doing a sidewalk assessment after the street reconstruct, so we could appropriately budget those funds. It's actually a project Justin was gearing up to do the assessment this year. But given this discussion, I told them just to hold off on that until we get a little bit better clarity on what we want to do with these sidewalk assessments. But that's another location where, you know, we could easily, on the heels of that reconstruct project last year, we could go in this year, we could go in next year. We could do an assessment project and install a sidewalk on the other side of the street, if we so desired. Let's see. 12th Avenue Northeast. That's the stretch just east of the one we just looked at that we're reconstructing this year. If you keep going east, we did a extensive project up there 2 or 3 years ago. That neighborhood already has sidewalk, that whole stretch, so that wasn't an issue. And then there's other areas of interest that we receive calls on, like 14th Avenue Northwest, between 2nd Street and Highway 81, 19th Street Southeast on the west side there in front of Runnings. It's another little gap that doesn't have any. 10th Avenue Northeast between Highway 81 and 11th Street. A lot of that is city-owned land that we would obviously be responsible for installing that sidewalk. So those are a few that are on our radar too that likely to have some need to be addressed in the future. With that, yeah, that's the sidewalk policies, 12th Avenue street width, sidewalk we've already removed from the project, and 7th Avenue that we do need direction on whether to continue with these sidewalk on that reconstruct or not.
All right, so council, I'm gonna knock off one that I think we can get to, which is 7th Avenue Southeast reconstruct. Are we going to recommend a sidewalk there? And then we'll go back and discuss the sidewalk policy in general. Or would you prefer doing it the opposite way around, having the sidewalk policy in general discussion and then go to 7th Avenue? Could you pull up a map again on 7th Avenue Southeast?
That's starting from Walgreens, 3 blocks west.
Yep.
So I'm gonna go back to our discussion with 12th Avenue. And through knowing how much traffic is in that area, it doesn't even compare to 10th Avenue because of traffic, because 10th Avenue is a major thoroughfare through Watertown. It's pulling, it's snow removal, it's emergency, there's all kinds of things. And to have people have to walk down the streets to get through that type of that's horribly unsafe and bad policy. Where when we listen to the residents along 12th Avenue, they're like, I agree with them, there's very little traffic. That's way, way different of a situation than 10th Avenue. So now let's go back down to Southeast and the one where that's on the board now for accepting or rejecting. There's a lot of traffic in that area. There's a lot of pedestrian, there's a lot of walkers, there's people walking from that residential area to go to McDonald's, Walgreens, businesses, Dairy Queen, liquor store. I mean, there's all kinds, small motel. I mean, there's just all kinds of walking traffic. And when I look at that, I'm like, I don't want all those people walking on the streets. And there's already sidewalk on the north side of Walgreens and McDonald's, and it just seems to make more sense in that area. That's my crazy brain talking out loud.
I'll do a short secondary speech and just say ditto.
When I look at this map, it looks like there's more right away to play with than what we were talking about in 12th Avenue. This driving on the street, I know it's a little wider, certainly than 12th Avenue. So I would echo Lynn's comments, but I don't want to be subjective on all of these. It'd be nice if we had a scoring card to talk about right-of-way availability, to talk about residences, to talk about, kind of go through the list that says this makes more sense. Otherwise, everything is subjective to what we think as a council.
So good share, excuse me, good share of this, we wouldn't be able to put a sidewalk in the north side because of the perpendicular parking.
Just on that Far East property.
Okay.
Right across
Great
from,
property.
yeah, all the rest of it would be fine.
Salvation Army would be fine, yeah.
And there's more commercial in this area.
Yeah.
There's no commercial.
To Councilman Peters' point, yeah, we have 80 feet of right away here. It's plenty of room.
Is anyone against putting sidewalk up there, down there?
My only comment on sidewalks, and a bigger policy issue. As I have traveled extensively around the country in a lot of new development areas. There's a lot of development in purely residential area now. It changes when you get to it, like a Collector Street on up. But there's a lot of them are not putting sidewalks in, or they're only putting them in on one side. And so those secondary residential roads aren't seeing sidewalks. Now, most of these places don't have, get snow, so I don't know if that comes into play here or not. But the one thing we need to make decisions on sidewalk policy based on need first. And then the next question is as a standard, do you always put it on both sides of the road? Do we need a sidewalk on both sides of the road? Or are we providing a path by having it on one side? Businesses are working their tails off to be able to afford their properties and maintain their properties and whatever it is, their businesses. We talk extensively about affordable housing. Well, if our policy is going to be where we don't have sidewalks, and we have these projects, we're just going to put sidewalks in, we're working against our other effort of putting in affordable housing. Because, look at those up on 12th. Those older neighborhoods are entry-level homes, and there are, in many cases, that is our affordable housing inventory. If we just automatically start clicking in sidewalks on both sides of the road, that maybe it's not a Collector Street, or maybe it's on both sides of the road, or whatever it is, we're adding cost to something that the real question is it necessary?
There's only,
Let's not put any more cost into any property than what we have to meet our, to accomplish what we want to, and that is safety.
there's, out of all that, the 3 blocks, there's 3 residents on those 3 blocks. 3 residential structures. The rest is all commercial.
Okay.
So how many residents?
Clarity, this would be an assessment project as well.
Yeah, correct.
I mean, they would definitely tell me we got definitely no means on both sides. I do understand Lynn's point that there is a lot of people that like to McDonald's and like to.
But then we have to rely on people to, like the chicken, right, across the road. Where the sidewalk is.
Yeah,
The sidewalk right now is on the south side of that road by Walgreens.
Right, but we're not talking about that whole stretch. I'm just saying, I want it to be effective because it's needed, not because we have a policy. Because all we're gonna do is add costs. I don't care if it's commercial or if it's not.
Yep.
I think it depends on the road. I mean, look what we do on 14th Avenue Northeast, all the way from Highway 81 to 19. We just got a painted line there on some of that says, here's your sidewalk, or your bike path, or whatever you want to call it. Well, if we believe in this, we should have footed the bill and put curb and gutter and sidewalk in up there then. So we do have mechanisms. All I'm saying is, whether you do this, don't do it. Personally, I think one side would suffice. I think that if if and when we go and we do the one side type stuff, I think there's a way of coming up with a policy that effectively allows for the sharing of that cost versus the one side bearing the whole cost. I think there's a way that we could do that effectively and be fair to people. But again, I will gravitate to what's there. They should. I mean, I look at our neighborhood, we've got sidewalks on both sides, all the way down Grand Avenue at Grandview, and there's all kinds of people out on the road. There's sidewalks there. So they're gonna gravitate to wherever they wanna go, but based on need.
I would just comment, and this is something that Lisa can vet out further, but as far as spreading the costs out, I don't believe that statute would allow us to assess property owners who are not receiving the benefit. And there's all kinds of weird court cases around assessments in general. What might be more helpful is if we can figure out some type of an internal kind of checklist or scoring rubric, because, well, like 10th Avenue, for example, we know that sidewalks were not gonna work on the one side for all of these reasons. So it justifies why you only put them on one. But if you're in a neighborhood where we don't have any of those mitigating factors, then you're telling one side versus the other, well, sorry, you're the luck of the draw, now you gotta pay for it. Where your neighbors across the street, even though it's appropriate, it connects to other sidewalks, we don't wanna put sidewalks in on both sides. I would just, think through that. Clearly, we're not amending anything today, but perhaps what would be helpful, because staff does this internally, they just go through it and, oh, there's too many driveways, or, we'd have to put in a retaining wall. But if there was some kind of formal rubric, matrix, checklist, that at least when we presented the projects, we could say, here are the things we went through and here's why we landed that we think, a sidewalk is necessary. Sidewalk is necessary on both sides, or we don't recommend putting a sidewalk in with this project for all of these reasons.
It sure seems to me that we should refine the policy before we take these out to bid, talk about it anymore. Otherwise, we're setting you guys up for failure because we're not confident in ourselves what to do until we get something put together. So I guess my recommendation would be, we should focus on the checklist, scorecard, whatever that says, yep, this justifies it, or no, this doesn't. And yes, we're gonna do one side, so we're gonna divvy up the cost to make it fair. I don't know, you guys are the experts. I just think we need to settle in on that before we talk about any more of these projects publicly. Otherwise, people are gonna say, well, what are you doing? Why are you doing it here and not here? And we don't have any justification right now.
So just so I'm clear, do you want to have that discussion and vet it out before we design and bid out this particular project, or?
Well, I think so.
We are,
Not to interrupt you, but I think just to determine the need, right? What's needed versus what's in policy. I don't think we know that yet on this project, do we?
I can't really speak to that, but in terms of the bidding timeline and such, Justin and Heath can probably speak more eloquently. We may, if it's gonna be a more thorough, longer term discussion, we may want to look at not doing this project this year. I don't know.
Justin?
I might offer the opposite suggestion. I mean, I think we could do the street project and then the sidewalk would be something we could maybe commit on.
Like I did with 7, or what, yeah.
I'm just as an engine, that road needs some work, and
My question on that is from a cost perspective, would that be counterproductive to come into the street and then come into the sidewalk? That's what I would.
And it's more disruptive to the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But to Justin's point, he's saying if we're uncertain on the sidewalk, we are probably ahead by doing the street rather than waiting for the street cost to inflate on us a year or two down the road. And based on the street needs that are out there today.
Yeah.
So-
Would that be a massive undertaking to come up with like a rating scale for
Yeah,
sidewalk necessity?
I've been pondering that from my perspective, yeah, I've worked in 4 other communities, and 3 as a city employee. And none of them have a clear objective rubric. It's either, it's kind of a high level, hey, do we want a sidewalk in our community or don't we? Really, that's as simple as it's boiled down to in Brookings and Madison and Gillette and the places I've worked before. So I'm racking my brains as we're talking here, trying to figure out what would that objective rubric look like. Not to say that one can't be built, but it's gonna take a little bit of time and thought, energy to put into one. Most communities just say, hey, we want sidewalks, or forget about it, we don't.
Well, you've already kind of designed that rubric in a way, if you think about it, because we didn't put them in, Burger King because of the driveways. That's one thing that, we can't restrict, or however you want to say it. So some of those are already in place.
I'm looking at this globally too. Not that I'm against sidewalks, but we have so many other infrastructure needs in the community. Are those dollars better allocated, reconstructing roads in the future versus putting in sidewalks where A, they're not welcomed by the community, they are the neighbors because they just don't want them, and B, is it really a need?
Yeah.
That's a rhetorical
Well,
question.
I would just, as a reminder, that whether we put in sidewalks or not, we still have to put in all the ramps. And so you're expending cost, regardless. To Heath's point, in the 4 communities I've been in, sidewalks are also, they just get weird. Everybody gets weird about sidewalks, and people love them, they love to walk on them, but if you don't have one, I don't want to pay, I don't want to have to, move the snow. But the, perhaps rather than creating some kind of rubric, is that staff in our, when we put together the information we give out to council, sorry, my words are not coming very well today. Perhaps we need to do a better job of identifying those mitigating factors. We're not recommending a sidewalk here because there's 10 driveways, 6 of them would be non-compliant. We are recommending sidewalk here because it doesn't have any of the mitigating factors like driveways and drainage and right of way and all of that. I don't know, it's really up to you guys, but to Keith's point, communities are either in or out on sidewalks, and more of them are going in on sidewalks, as we talk about walkability and accessibility. We do live in an environment where everyone drives, but a lot of people are moving away from that. So it's really what your philosophy is, and we can administer it appropriately from there.
I would agree, I would say completely agree with Councilman Danforth, like in some areas, like even with new housing, especially if we're trying to get affordable housing, if this is a mechanism, not having sidewalks, if that can make them less expensive, that is something I am all for. I think this is an imperfect science, but in lieu of a policy of having a rating scale, not knowing how long that would take, I'd say we can go forward with the imperfect policy that we have. I think if you guys want to analyze it a little bit closer and come up with, the drainage, the driveways and things like that, because that's probably what we would judge a sidewalk on for need in the future anyway, and we can start doing that now. I understand it's an imperfect science, but truthfully, being honest, one of those metrics of judging whether or not we would vote to put a sidewalk in is literally comes down to how many neighbors show up to protest it. So we could put you guys to work for 2 freaking years to come up with a great policy. And if we get enough people showing up to tell us we're stupid, we're still gonna vote it down.
Yeah.
So I'm just, and that's the thing, and so it goes back to one thing I did want to tell Heath and Justin, but also any city employee. I hope that you don't take offense when we vote something down, and don't take it like we're second guessing you, because we get second guessed. I don't think any one of us ever go out in public without getting second guessed on something we've said or done. So, but at the same time, I also get it where, my job, it's like if I get someone telling me what to do, and I think that it's like, I put in so much work, you idiot. I get it.
No harm, no foul there, Mayor, at all.
We give you guys a policy to follow and then we don't always follow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's why I think this discussion is a good one to have.
you talked about the handicap and the lawsuit. I've lived here all my life. That goes back to the Herb Jensen mayor days when he refused the United States government. Not gonna do it. Now we're paying for it.
So I don't know I don't think that we should stop all sidewalk judgments until we get a rating system, although I do like the idea of a rating system.
Just an idea to Councilman Peter's point about affordable housing, things like that. There's a way to accomplish assisting developers with affordable housing without foregoing sidewalks. So whether it's, increasing our contribution to the sidewalk program or working with them on assessments, right, directly so that it's not impacting the lot price, or, hey, we'll pay for them. They're important to our community and connectivity or whatever. But they don't have to be mutually exclusive. We could get really creative with how we assist in holistically around workforce housing. Affordable's subjective, so.
When you talk about sidewalk on one side compared to both, I mean, that's another thing you look at, because the city allows about $20 linear foot. So if we decide to put sidewalk on just one, and we're looking at our share of the cost on that, we could almost we're only gonna put it on one, contribute $30.
Sure.
And come out the same amount as if we requested, in all fairness. Because now I gotta put sidewalk on my side, but that guy don't.
Right.
But the city's gonna contribute more to my side.
Right. Well, and if some of the discomfort is around the assessment process as a whole, and that is a very, very standard method of doing this, so we're not out of the norm, but, when we put the budget together, we budget for assessment projects, we have to pay for them up front, but now we're gonna recoup those costs. Well, you could give direction that we're just not gonna assess sidewalks anymore. Maybe we're not gonna assess infill sidewalks. We'll assess, new construction or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of different ways, but those have budgetary implications, right? So if you're gonna put $500,000 annually into sidewalks or $1 million, that's $500,000 or $1 million that you're not putting into streets, you're not putting in parks. But you can do those things if that's what you choose to do.
So council, I'm not sure if I'm hearing a consensus on doing a rating policy, although I don't think any of us are against it.
I'd like to see that.
And I do think that I can speak on council's behalf to say, I would encourage the engineers to take into consideration all of these factors that otherwise we would be having a rating system. I mean, if you can start taking into those considerations now, please do so. Regarding to 7th Avenue Southeast, I'm not absolutely certain I got a clear go ahead on that. I'm okay with it, but I think Councilman Jurgens was.
I'd be okay with one side though.
Yeah, I'm okay with one side.
I'm okay with one side.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of goes back to, I'd like to see some kind of uniformity in our decision making, but
It makes these guys' job that much harder, because they got a line for sidewalk on both sides. Then they gotta look at why not, like these driveways and stuff.
But I would argue that's gonna make their job even harder if we move forward with 7th And then the next project that comes back, we
Yeah.
completely reverse it.
Well, that's what we're doing at 12 right now.
Right.
Yeah,
So
so we gotta come up with
policy in
something.
Yeah.
We gotta find a policy. that
I
we
still
can-
think the people that are living along there, I thought the process worked out good. Look at how many people we had. They worked together. They talked a lot before they got here.
Yeah, how can we avoid that though, by saying there's too many driveways, there's not enough right of way before even proposing that plan?
Well, because that's gonna happen, being way back down on that one, that's gonna happen in every assessment project we have going forward.
Yeah.
To your point, so.
A couple points to the assessment, that I know just to, I don't know, be leery of, because I know of case law, and Lisa can help guide us with this too. One thing we don't want to do is become subjective with our assessments, how we're choosing to apply them. There's a recent article in a neighboring regional community that's actually residents are taking their council to task on how subjective they've applied some assessments, saying, hey, why are you sticking us with this? You didn't do it here. And so we would just want to be careful to whatever our policy is, make sure it's uniform and consistent as it can be, and as objective as it can be. The one side kind of opens that door of, hey, why are you sticking on my side, not their side? It starts to get in a little bit of a sticky area where just something to be cognizant of. I'm not the attorney in the room, but I know that there's case law and situations that are currently going on right now as we speak related to assessments. Not having
Lisa doesn't need any more to do your through.
no, she doesn't.
Even, well,
So really, with that, it comes down to the money.
Okay,
So if we're going to just one side, Randy's idea,
Give them 30 instead of 20.
I don't know. I think I'm gonna ask our director, Von I, to answer that question, but with his sunglasses down on his nose instead of on his
okay.
head.
What's the question again, sir?
it's not on camera. Pete too?
That's
it is
intentional.
being recorded, so.
Okay. Sidewalk policy, we don't need one in writing. It would be good to have at least that taken into consideration. It actually would not be a bad idea if the lift would be too heavy to go back and just do some of that math on 12th Avenue, because at least for every sidewalk in the foreseeable future, we are going to be asked about that. And if we have some sort of comparison, that would help us in the short term. Super long term, yeah, we can work up a rating system. 7th Avenue Southeast, I think we're looking at one side is at least okay.
And which side would that be?
Well, it's more compensating, it's also, it's already blocked the sidewalk in there. Correct? I mean,
2 or 3 blocks, actually.
am I right or wrong here? Just, because
Yeah.
why would we shift them to the other side of the street?
Yeah, you're correct. South side has more existing.
Yeah, sidewalk already, so.
All right. Good, city manager?
I am,
Okay.
thank you.
Any future council items right ahead?
So we will have the 12th Avenue bid, correct? At the next agenda, or the next council meeting for
Okay.
award.
Yes.
So that's coming in front of you for sure.
With the narrowing of the street.
I don't want to cause a problem, and honestly, if anyone feels like this is something that they're really concerned about, it might help us. The Humane Society is back at it again. They want the city to donate land. Oh.
This is being recorded.
Oh, sorry.
But
It's nothing,
Yeah.
it's nothing terrible or anything like that. I'm just saying, it's like, is anyone philosophically against that is the only thing I was going to seek out. I'm just saying, they called me up. I said I would approach it. I brought it up to the city manager. And it's like, if philosophically, that's not something we can do. And I'm not promising anything because we have no idea if we even have land that they would want or that that they would want that we would be willing to give away.
That was gonna be the next question.
Yeah, because it's like, this is still super, we haven't even taken step one, but I just wanted to ask if philosophically, if you were against that, then.
The thing that we'll just have to work through is, so if you all decide that you're on board with that, we've identified some land that would work, that would meet everyone's needs, is the actual disposal process. So we can't just, hey, here, take this land without following process, so.
And I will just say something because it's on record, but this is not a policy that the city wants to get involved in with every organization. It is a unique situation with the Humane Society. We've already been through a long discussion with the Humane Society in regards to their lease. It would take very special circumstances for the city to go down this route more than in extreme circumstances. So there, I have my disclaimer for the record. So with that, any public comment? I don't see any public comment. There's no reason for executive session. We have a motion to adjourn from Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Peterson. Any discussion on that? Hearing none. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Yep.